Okay, so today I'm going to talk about Alfonso the 13th, and that is who I chose. So his early life, he was born in Madrid on May 17th, 1886. His father, King Alfonso the 12th, died 6 months before he was born. So this meant because his father was king, King Alfonso the 13th, his son, was actually king the day he was born. Obviously, a newborn cannot rule a country, so he instead had to have his mother be the regent until he was old enough to become king. He had a very thorough education, making him the first of several generations to get a good education. This didn't happen a lot, especially kings and royalty family did not get good educations. They just never had the time or never thought about getting a good education. Therefore, when they thought it out for King Alfonso the 13th, they wanted him to have a good education. His mom wanted him to go and do that. So that made him the first of several generations in his family to be able to get a good education. And like I said, his mother served as his regent until he was old enough to become king. We'll talk about that on the next slide. So he actually became king on May 17th, 1902, at the age of 16. So it still seems like a young age, but back then that was not. He was considered, an older young adult by then, and he was able to become king and rule the country. However, he did become king during a very hard time. In 1898, Spain endured a bad defeat in the Spanish-American War. And so therefore he had to deal with, between the years of 1902 and 1906, he had to deal with 14 ministerial crises and 8 prime ministers. That was a lot during then. Usually you didn't have different prime ministers coming in and out. And several crises at the time were just hard to deal with, especially, think of your age as age 16. How are you going to be able to deal with all this and figure out how to rule the country, especially coming in as king during all this time? So he ruled Spain up until this time. He was continuing on. By the age of 18, he decided to look for a wife. So he finally found one after several different dates, I guess you could say, and talking to their parents. On May 31st, 1906, Alfonso the 13th married Princess Ina of Battenberg in Madrid. So because where he was at when he was ruling Spain, they got married in Madrid. An attempt was made to assassinate the couple on their wedding day by Matteo Morale, whose bomb killed bystanders instead of Alfonso and Ina. So he actually had a bomb set up to kill the two of them, but because he wasn't in range of the couple, it killed bystanders instead. That's terrible to think about, because you're a bystander at a wedding and you see the couple getting married, and instead you're killed, and it wasn't even for you. So very violent wedding to be at. On May 10th, 1907, which was the year after they got married, the couple's first child was born. In total, they had 6 children during their marriage. So king duties. On May 1921, he made a speech denouncing the parliamentary system in Spain. The government got so bad from then on up to the point that in September of 1923, General Miguel Primo de Rivera took over and set up a military dictatorship. So he actually he wasn't promoted to that stance. He didn't even ask Alfonso either, could he become the dictator, but Alfonso was instead, he agreed with it. He said, this is good to do. He said, I cannot be the one to handle the situation the way it is, the government being so bad. So we need to try something different for the army to be able to take control and do what they have to do to make sure Spain is the way it should be. However, in the early 1930s, the dictatorship came to an end. Basically, the army said, we're done. We're not going to follow dictatorship anymore. That's not how we were when this started. We're not going to listen to what you say. And because of that, they also disagree with Alfonso, because he is the one that allowed the dictatorship to happen. So he's the one that said, yeah, let's go ahead and do this. And he announced General Miguel Primo de Rivera to the city and to the country, and showed that that's who he was, and that's what he was going to be doing, was becoming a dictator. So in turn, in the 1930s, when they said that we're done listening to the dictator, They also had a bad rep of Alfonso along with that too, and said, "You're the one that did this to us. We no longer like you either." But Alfonso was still king during this time. So, leading up to death, when the Second Spanish Republic was proclaimed on April 14th, 1931, Alfonso fled Spain. So, he actually was forced to flee Spain. It says that, let's see, the army basically withdrew their support from Alfonso and he was forced to leave Spain. He kind of did it on his own too, though. He knew that because he was the one that set up this dictatorship and he was the one that approved it, he knew that the army didn't like him anymore. So he knew that basically either he was going to have to leave or it would be heck for him to stay in Spain. So he wound up fleeing and he moved to Rome, Italy, where he later died. He died on February 28th, 1941. He was originally buried there, but I found some articles saying too that his ashes were later moved to Spain, where he was king, where he grew up, things of that nature. But originally he was buried in Rome, Italy, and he died before his wife and kids, obviously. So his wife still preceded him, and all of the 6 kids still preceded him too. And I believe that is all I have for you guys. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it.